Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Wilkins. I'm the CFO of Phoenix Global Mining Limited. We listed on AIM at the end of June this year, raising £4.6 million. I'd also like to introduce our CEO, Dennis Thomas, who's going to take over from me and go through the project slides, and Marcus Edwards-Jones, our chairman, all available to chat to you later. So as mentioned, we listed on AIM at the end of June. We have an 80% interest in the Empire copper, gold, silver, tungsten mine in Idaho in the United States. This is a past producing mine. It was in limited operation up until the Second World War, recovering some pretty decent grades of copper from reported head grades of some 6 to 8%, plus gold and silver. And indeed, at the end of the production, the last shipments going out of the mine were over 4% tungsten. We've been focusing purely on an open pit area at the top of the hill. This is oxide material. It can be mined, as I said, open pit, cheap mining. It's near the surface. We have released yesterday an updated resource following a 28-hole drill program that we've completed since the IPO. That resource has increased from our IPO resource by 33%. It's also added decent amounts of zinc, gold, and silver to the resource. The pre-feasibility study for the open pit project is well underway. It will be completed on time in Q2 next year. We will then proceed straight to bankable construction financing, and we expect to be in production by 2020, producing 7,000 tons per annum of cathode copper. But the oxide open pit mine really is the tip of the iceberg. It's the underground mine that we know exists because they were mining it that has massive potential. So while we're developing the oxide mine, as Dennis will explain, we will be drilling and proving up, finding out what we've actually got underground. We currently think that we perhaps only understand 5% of the entire ore system. We recently acquired 2 highly prospective cobalt properties on the Idaho Cobalt Belt. That's approximately 100 miles north of the Empire Mine. We're in Idaho in the USA. This is a fantastic mining-friendly first world jurisdiction. Everyone is totally supportive. We have access to power, to water. The mine is a 10-minute drive from US Highway 93. The management team, well, we're a fairly seasoned mix of technical and financial orientated people. We have financed, constructed, and operated mines before in significantly more difficult locations, I can assure you, than the USA. I would just highlight our project manager and CEO of the operating company in the States, Ryan. Although he's worked all over the world, he is an Idaho born and bred man, and he's truly invaluable to the team. On the corporate front, we have 230 million shares in issue. We listed at 4p. We're currently trading at 5, giving us a market cap of about 11.5 million quid at the moment. Apart from management, we have a good mix of shareholders, high net worth individuals, and some institutional investors, plus XGen Resources, which is TSXV listed and owns the other 20% of the Empire Mine. So with that, Dennis, I will hand over to you to get a bit more technical.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
I'll make this fairly, you've been sitting very patiently all evening, so I'll make this as painless as possible. A lot of figures in here. And really throw it back to you as soon as possible to ask the questions. Historically, copper was found initially 1888 in central Idaho, and there was a producing mine from 1901 to 1942. The mine eventually closed down because, in fact, America entered the war, and most of the miners, in fact, were conscripted to go and fight. So since that time, it really has just been scratched. Production, as you'll see from a section in a minute, went down to 1,100 feet, but on the side of a mountain, so access was adits rather than shafts. Yesterday, we announced a new NI 43-101 JORC compliant resource, which I'll go into in a little bit more detail. But basically, we're now in the process of completing or performing a pre-feasibility study, as Richard said, which we hope for completion in April next year. We have now an established oxide resource above the sulfides, and we are currently as well embarking on the program, just starting a program now to look at test those sulfides. This is probably the most, in my opinion, the most important slide of the lot, because you hear us miners talk about oxides and sulfides, and one of the questions, particularly by investors who aren't mining savvy, for want of a better word, is what is the difference? This is a long section through the Empire mine, and you'll see the old workings, some of the old workings there, which in fact, even though they look quite wide, in fact are no more than 2 or 3 meters. That ore zone there stretches over 1 kilometer. The blue line represents the division between oxides and sulfides. So basically it's one ore body. But the top portion of about 100 to 120 meters, or 300 or so feet, has in fact weathered. Originally was sulfide, but has weathered. So we refer to that as the oxide zone. So that has oxide copper minerals. Below that blue line are the copper sulfides, the primary sulfides, which have not been altered. And along that blue line, importantly as well, is an enrichment zone where some of that copper that has been weathered from the surface oxide zone has in fact concentrated. And in fact, we have values in that, along that blue zone there, of up to 11.4% copper. So there's an enriched zone in that. Now, historically, technology changed in about the 1960s, and the first people to come in and look at to develop the oxides were in 1960, from 1964, and in that period, above that blue line, some 287 holes were drilled into that oxide ore body. Amazingly, no holes were drilled into the sulfide. Some penetrated the sulfide, but no work has been done on the sulfide. And as Richard said, anecdotally, a lot of those stopes, a lot of those workings, there was no geological control, and in fact, they mined high-grade leads, which were running between 6 and 8% copper. They recovered some gold, some silver, but basically a lot of the oxide ore was, and a lot of the sulfide ore, in fact, the recovered grade was 3.64% from the historic mine, but the balance of the ore was chucked into the river and went down the valley, down the Lost River Valley. And so at the moment the 287 holes went in until we came, and we got a maiden resource which we IPO'd on of about 12.8 million tons, all category JORC compliant resource. And since that time, we've put in 28 holes, infill holes, and we, as I said, as Richard said, in fact, we were very pleased to announce a new resource yesterday of 19.338 million tons, and that's metric tons, not imperial tons. And that's one thing worth noting, that in the States, of course, they're still in the old feet and inches and yards and imperial units. So we refer to miles a lot rather than meters. But these are now converted back to metric values. Anyway, the net result was our original resource that we went to IPO on was 12.8 million tons, giving us 68,300 tons of copper in our resource inventory. 28 holes drilled, we put in to fill in some of the gaps in that original model that we had when we went to IPO. And those 28 holes at a cost of about $1 million has in fact generated a new resource of 19.38 million tons, but has also importantly given us zinc, gold, and silver resources as well, which has never been assayed before. Most of the resource before, everybody just drilled for the oxide copper, and now we're in a situation where we in fact have considerably increased the resource and added the gold, the zinc, and the silver to the inventory. So those 28 holes have been very good. And also, if I may just duck back to here, on the this is open to the north. So in other words, this ore body carries on to the north. So the drilling literally has been concentrated in that region there. Nothing has been done in this region here. So the resources that we've just declared are in that portion there. Basically, we've had a 51% increase in the total copper resource, so up to 19 million tonnes. We've increased our measured and indicated resource by 43%, but more importantly, that our contained copper has gone up from 68,300 tonnes to 90,547 tonnes, a 33% increase. We've added the gold, silver, and zinc, and the total inventory before we announced the new resource, in fact, contained metal value was 462 million, and as of yesterday, it now stands in that open pit of $1.1 billion worth of ore as it sits there at the moment. This will give you an idea of in fact, how the pit looks. And I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. I'm very happy to discuss this when we're finished. It's basically the pit model. The interesting thing is that a lot of this pit, there is a slope downwards that way, and much of the pit, in fact, isn't visible from the valley below. It's going to be, a lot of it's going to be hidden. And these are various sections, long sections, and cross sections taken across the pit. As I said, I'm happy to discuss those in the later on if anybody wants to talk through them. Pre-feasibility study is underway and making extremely good progress. We're right on target. We finished our update of the JORC resources. We're in the process at the moment of doing metallurgical test work on the oxides. We're doing our geotechnical and hydrological studies. We're doing our environmental studies, which is proceeding very well. And we've just started really pulling together the company called M3 Engineering, starting to pull together now the whole of this work. And by the end of March into the beginning of April, we'll be producing our PFS. So basically, the strategy at the Empire Mine is phase 1, which is the open pit oxide development. And that is targeting, as Richard said, 7,000 tonnes of ore per annum production in 2020 via basically a crush and heap leach SXEW operation, just producing copper cathodes. We're going to be looking to expand that resource, particularly along strike to the north. Finish our pre-feasibility study 2018, do a bankable feasibility study Q2 2019, and then go into project financing, commencing production 2020. Now, importantly, phase 2, and that is the really exciting thing about the Empire Mine, is that nobody has done any additional work underneath the oxide pit. And this is a zone which is between 50 and 150 metres wide, and that we know extends some 1.7 kilometres underneath the oxides. And we've just completed our first diamond drill hole, which went down to 1,034 feet into the sulfides. We're expecting the results from that next month, all being well. We're in the process as well of doing a second diamond drill hole, which is going underneath, and again underneath the working, so we're looking at depth. And that will probably go 960, 1,000 feet down. We're also in the process of opening 2 of the old adits and we have the initial portal structures up, and we're going through the mine health and safety administration's requirements before we go underground. And we're hoping that we can get access into the mine levels. And if we can get access into the mine levels, then we've got access literally into the sulfide ore body, which nobody has had, I think, since the mine closed down. And we'll be evaluating particularly the sulfide potential. But what is very exciting is that we'll also be looking at the tungsten potential, because we believe this is a zone system as we stand at the moment. The third, if you like, the third string to our bow, which particularly is exciting, is that we've also, it's very interesting to hear about that hot, I think Ariana's hot zone. This particular zone here is known as the Idaho Cobalt Belt, and this is very hot and has been very hot just recently, obviously, for cobalt. We have a subsidiary company, Bora Resources, which we've had, and we've identified 2 prospective claim groups, which we let's say have beaten the Canadian juniors in the process of obtaining. We have our geological team, 2 of our senior geological team, in fact, have experience of working in this zone. As Richard said, it's about 130 miles north of where we are at the moment in central Idaho. And this is particularly exciting. We managed to secure those, I think, with 24th of October, we had an RNS which basically said we'd acquired these 2 claims. We've actually had a team on the ground that have been doing preliminary mapping, have been doing surface sampling, and we hope to have those results in the very near future. There are already 2 e-cobalt, US cobalt, and I think again several of the Canadian juniors are very active in this area. But Bora will utilise the substantial in-house copper belt experience of the geological team. I'll leave you to leaf through these and have a read of these. So we've been achieving since IPO. We've done our drill program, updated our JORC resource quite considerably, with a massive increase in copper inventory. Plus, we've added zinc, gold, and silver, and we are starting to have a look at the deep sulfide, exciting deep sulfide exploration potential. And of course, we've added the new cobalt. I can leave you to look through the various peer group. I think this is the investment case. I did a Vox podcast yesterday, and I said, really, they say, what are the 3 things that really are most important? And I think we're in the right commodities. We're in copper, cobalt. We have tungsten potential. We're at the right time, because with technology moving as it is, and particularly electric vehicles and green energy, we're in the right commodities. And importantly, we're in the right place. We're in a low-risk environment with a highly supportive local population and administration. It's a great location. And I think, please read through the rest of the presentation. I think there's all sorts of backup information into that. I won't trouble with that at this stage, and I think we'll just throw it open to questions.
Questions, anybody?
Very interesting presentation. Just one thing, can you just define what a low-cost leach operation is? I mean, are you talking about $20 million or $10 million?
I think the capital expenditure that we're possibly anticipating will be somewhere in the region, the capex $45–50 million. Yeah, in that sort of ballpark. We're doing the metallurgical evaluation of this at the moment, and I think our new resource that we've declared yesterday poses some interesting questions. And I think that suddenly we were always aware obviously that we have gold and silver and zinc in the upper ore body, and if you like, in the oxides. It's there in relatively large quantities and significant value as well. I mean, we have 6 million ounces of silver. We have 165,000 ounces of gold to factor in as well. We always knew that if we just took copper initially, then our waste product would actually contain gold and silver and zinc, and we could go back and remine that. So, if you like, it's given us some interesting questions, very nice questions, I might add.
It's just, I mean, at the moment in this market, you take that debt against your current market cap. It's not an easy, I don't see it as an easy thing to do. But you say you've got, I mean, your grades aren't that particularly high?
Well, if you start factoring in the copper equivalent grades, we're up at around 0.84, 0.85% copper equivalent, and that's why I'm saying it's if you like, it's raised some interesting questions, in fact, on how we actually on us going forward. And I mean, at the moment, we're just targeting a simple heap leach SXEW plant, which is very simple. And low capex, and they're the sort of figures I would imagine. If we consider anything else, then obviously you're going to a higher capital, but a better return. I think these are the questions that certainly the PFS that we're doing at the moment will cover.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? Is there anybody else? You've had one. Yes, this gentleman here. Is there anybody else?
I'm not a geologist, but is lithium ion a possible resource? Because with the advent of renewables for energy, it's going to be enormous demand for storage.
Yes. Is it? Sorry, what was the question again?
Lithium ion, is it a possible resource?
Lithium?
Yeah.
Not lithium here, no. I mean, with cobalt, certainly, the cobalt belt. The cobalt belt, in fact, the mineralogy of the cobalt belt, where we're looking at the moment, and next year we're hoping to, next year, with the result of the sampling that we're doing now, we will actually be diamond drilling for resources in the drilling season next season. But that's also it's copper, cobalt, and gold. So even though we're talking about our cobalt developments, there's actually copper and gold in that ore body as well. Not lithium, I'm afraid.
Question over mining restrictions, and obviously probably won't have any with this administration, but going forward when you start production.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are. We have found the agencies in Idaho particularly supportive. There's a particular chain on the mines, and you'll see in the appendix we have there's patented and unpatented. The unpatented developments, our mine developments, are all on patented land, which basically means we own the land. So in other words, the permitting procedure is much more rapid. It's not at federal level, it's at state level. Yeah. So developments, for example, in the Cobalt Belt, they're unpatented claims, so therefore the environmental, you have to go through the Bureau of Land Management and people like that. But it's a very supportive environment for doing that.
So
there are procedures.
You don't think it's a risk?
No, not a risk. You just got to obey and go through the procedures. Yeah.
Time for one last question, if anyone's got a question at all. Gentleman at the back gets it.
Has the company sufficient funds to support an active exploration programme going forward, say for the next year or two?
I'll tell you what, I'll throw that to the CFO. There we are. It's always a good place to be.
You never get a straight answer from the CFO.
No, that's why I'm throwing it.
I'll give it as straight as I can. We will come back to the market next year to raise money for the bankable feasibility study and additional funds for whatever is the next stage of the exploration program on the underground mine. We've got sufficient funds to do everything that we said we would do at the time of the IPO, which will take us through to the pre-feasibility study. So we've got sufficient funds to do that, sufficient funds to do all the initial exploration on the underground mine, sufficient funds to do initial work on the Cobalt properties, and then we'll come back to the market, hopefully at a better share price for some more finance. We will need more money, obviously, to develop this.
Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you. Thanks.